So for our last seminar of the day, we have a very, very senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada joining us from the United States of America, Her Grace Malati Mataji. So she is joined into Zoom and she's able to see our group here. So I would just want to take a few minutes to introduce Mataji. I know there's no way, I can do justice to introducing Her Grace Malati Mataji. And she actually doesn't need any introduction. But just to do the convention, Malati Devi Dasi has joined Iskcon in San Francisco, USA. She was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in San Francisco in early 1967. And since then, we all know she has been an integral part of the pioneer years of the Iskcon, especially setting up Krishna consciousness in the UK. She often traveled with her husband, Shamsundar Prabhu, who was Srila Prabhupada's personal secretary. So what we hear from Malati Prabhu is going to be, a very personal note of her experiences of Srila Prabhupada. Among all the tasks that she did, she also cooked for Srila Prabhupada. She then moved to India to assist and establish the Hare Krishna movement here. And she played many key roles in India, including establishing extensive deities and deity worship. In 1990, I'm going to skip a lot of her milestones because of time. We want to take her association as much as possible. In 1990, she established an all-female Iskcon temple, which was awarded a bronze plaque by the State of Ohio Historical Society, recognizing the center as the first Vaishnava or Hindu temple in the state, mentioning in detail its unique status in training women in Krishna consciousness. Her Grace joined the GBC in 1998, and among all her responsibilities, of which she had many, she was focused initially in the United States. Very important role she played, and that we can connect today with Sakhi Sanga, is that she is a founding member of the Vaishnavi ministry, formerly known as Women's Ministry. And through this ministry, she facilitated so many activities for women, including international retreats, and her focus was spiritual advancement of women in Iskcon. Another project of hers, which I can relate very well, is the Festival of Inspiration, which was held in New Vrindavan. I was very fortunate to attend many of these. It was, festival which was 10 times this magnitude. So this was North America's largest gathering with the theme of Vaishnava education and culture. Her Grace spends most of her time traveling, offering classes and instructions in Krishna conscious practice and philosophy, and is a regular participant in interreligious gatherings. Of all the duties, she holds a deep concern for the future of Iskcon in general and for the youth in particular. She advocates women in all manners of service, inspired by Srila Prabhupada, and who has always engaged her in her service. She is currently co-authoring a book that is a compilation of personal remembrances of female disciples of the movement's founder of Srila Prabhupada, I think Srila Prabhupada's daughters. So we have Her Grace Malati Prabhu joining in. She's joined in, and she's going to speak on Lives in Iskcon are perfectly guided by Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna Mataji. Dandat Pranamaji. Please accept my humble obeisances, and over to you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
I will. So, can you hear now?
We are not able to hear you, Prabhu.
I hear you very well. All the things you said that were wrong. Can you hear now? Do you hear them?
Yes. Yes, Mataji.
Okay, well, perhaps you should have had a Vaishnavi technician. Should I start? Should I begin?
Yes.
I don't hear you.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. From the ladies' experience, where most often we're not hearing this. And this book should be read by everyone. It's not a book for ladies, it's a book for everyone. And it was inspired. I was inspired to have such a book when I realized that people were not understanding, people in general, men and women, were not understanding Srila Prabhupada and his wonderful broad-mindedness. So you've been hearing from some amazing Vaishnavas, and I just fall at their feet. I fall at all of your feet. I'm not I'm not scholarly at all. I have no vast experience at many of the arts attributed to ladies, such as parenting and other types of things that are often seen as duties of ladies. Somehow or other, that just was not part of my lifestyle. But I had the good fortune of coming in personal contact with Srila Prabhupada and becoming very convinced through his association, through his example of how he perfectly guided our lives. I became convinced of his ability and his spiritual status of being a spiritual leader who would be able to guide the whole world. It's a very good statement. But the fact is, Srila Prabhupada has done just that. He's guiding the whole world for anybody who wants to listen and learn about the love of God. At the same time, sometimes, before I start, Om Agyantamrandasya Jananasakavaya Chakshur Medhamina Tamasmi Sri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvashesha Srinivadi Vaskachane Satane Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So sometimes we hear criticism that Iskcon is overly focused on Srila Prabhupada. Claiming we are narrow-minded or fanatical. And this is now even coming, sadly enough, from the inside as well, as I discovered only a week ago. One temple of newer in that long-term practitioners, but not Prabhupada disciples, so they're having discussions. Do we have to follow all of Prabhupada's instructions? And I mean, just simply asking that question is not inherently a wrong question. It's a question that should lead to a very good discussion. But they're not actually questioning. They think that it's not necessary, and they're discussing which instructions they shouldn't have to be bothered to follow. And I find this alarming. So I feel compelled, with whatever time is left in my old age, to address this topic.
Not better.
I can't understand you, what you were saying. Are you trying to tell me something? Maybe to address this topic about Srila Prabhupada's position in Iskcon, and about his ability to perfectly guide the members of Iskcon back home to Godhead. I've spoken about this quite often, that exclusive loyalty to Srila Prabhupada is not fanaticism. As members of Iskcon, we know, we honor all saintly Vaishnavas. We honor spiritual teachers and seekers of the truth from whatever authentic path they may adhere to. But as members of Iskcon, we are bound heart and soul to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as expounded and taught to us by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. So I hope to express something to this effect. As a little back history, many saintly acharyas followed in the line after the departure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu over 500 years ago in June of 1534. Initially, they were able to carry on the message, but gradually the sampradaya fell into disarray, with upper sampradayas, false sampradayas exposing concocted philosophical deviations and rituals, and eventually Vaishnavas were completely ignored and rejected by the respectable public, and the pure message of Mahaprabhu was lost. So in 1838, when things were just, you could say, rock bottom, Vinod Thakur appeared, and it was by his divine guidance as a seeker of truth, he came in contact with the Chaitanya Chaitamrita at the age of 31, and this completely transformed his life. By careful scrutiny and repeated readings, he became fully convinced of the divinity of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as being none other than Lord Krishna himself. So with great conviction and being fully realized of this esoteric truth, it became his mission to expose these bogus followers and restore the message of Mahaprabhu to its rightful purity and respect. And he was assisted in his efforts by his son, who later became known as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Actually, he prayed to the Lord for a ray of Vishnu to help him in this effort. So that ray of Vishnu was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and together they fearlessly preached the glories of the Sankirtan movement far and wide within the borders of India. However, both were visionary, both understood the message of Mahaprabhu was intended to be preached far and wide outside the confines and borders of India. And this became closer to manifesting in 1896, when two things occurred. One was a small book written in English by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, The Life and Precepts of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, made its way outside the borders of India into countries like England and Canada, and thus in a small way expanded the possibility of spreading the Lord's teachings all over the world, as the Lord himself had declared. And the second indication was actually far more exacting, and that was on September 1st, 1896, was the appearance of a male child on the occasion of Nandasotvaha in Tolikanj, Calcutta, under a jackfruit tree. Named Abai, this baby was destined to become an international spiritual leader, as foretold by an astrologer. And this, of course, is our Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So when I say our Srila Prabhupada, because I'm distinguished in 1977 in Vrindavan, India. Now I was told that there are newer persons participating in this wonderful retreat. So, part to the devotees who are more informed, you may know much of what I'm saying, but I'm feeling really compelled that everyone should understand Srila Prabhupada, so I'm really thinking about these newer persons. And as my experience last week showed me, even older members of Iskcon are not free from the unfortunate doubt about Prabhupada's role within this society. So during the time Srila Prabhupada spread the message of Mahaprabhu, particularly in the form of the Maha Mantra, all over the planet. That means he started actively preaching outside of India, as most of you know, from the age of 70 years old. I don't know how many of you who are attending this conference are 70 years plus. I'm now, a couple weeks ago, I turned 77, and I think those of us who are in older bodies are even further amazed at what he accomplished, considering the age he was when he began his mission. Of course, it was always in his mind, and it wasn't like all of a sudden he turned 70 and started doing something. It was a lifetime dedication, we know that. But it actually manifests from the age of 70. So during this time, Srila Prabhupada was spreading the message in the form of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and the teachings from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam all over the planet. And this feat is without equal, and nor is it in dispute. It's an established record that cannot be broken. We know in the material world, the secular world, quite often there are, particularly in sports, people maybe they're running or jumping or performing some sport, and they make a record, the fastest runner, the highest jumper, the greatest of all time. But those records are there to be broken, and they will be broken, and they can be broken. But Srila Prabhupada, in spreading the message of Mahaprabhu, established a record that cannot be broken because it's done. So we can understand Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is not just another name or a picture in the line of disciplic succession, because he accomplished something that no other previous acharya had ever done. And in total dedication to the order of his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who gave him the instruction to take the message and preach in the Western world in English upon his first meeting. So in dedication to that order, he fulfilled the mandate of Lord Chaitanya by spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. And no one else can make that distinction. It says in the Adi Lila of Chaitanya Chaitamrita 7:11 that no one can successfully preach the Sankirtan movement without being specifically empowered by the Lord. And such a person is known as Shabdavesh Avatar, specifically empowered by the Lord to fulfill a particular mission. So this title, Shabdavesh Avatar, and the fact that he spread the mission of Mahaprabhu worldwide remains without dispute. An acharya is one who teaches by example. And Srila Prabhupada perfectly exhibited this mood of acharya. He never claimed fame or prestige for his accomplishments, which would take days to elucidate. When asked about his success, he would very modestly say, if I have done anything, if, he would say, if I have done anything, it is that I have always followed the instructions of my spiritual master. I have not deviated. It is by his mercy that there is any success. In other words, he was 100% loyal to his spiritual master. And this was expressed in the Bhagavatam. This loyalty was expressed in the Bhagavatam by Sri Prahlad in 7.9.28, a very well-known verse. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, because of my association with material desires, one after the other, I was gradually falling into a blind well full of snakes, following the general populace. But your servant, Narada Muni, finally accepted me as his disciple and instructed me how to achieve transcendence. And then, the most important part. Therefore, my first duty is to serve him. How could I leave his service? So there is so much packed into this simple statement, but a very profound statement. And I will focus on the beautiful relationship between Prahlad and Narada Muni, his guru. We all know the life as a child of Prahlad was quite horrendous in many details, because he was tortured, abused by his father, to the extent that his father had his teachers try to kill him, and when they were successful, his own father tried to kill him. But nothing could deviate Prahlad from the service to Narada Muni, even when his very life was threatened, ways we can't even imagine. He remained fixed and composed. He didn't go outside seeking the advice of ill-informed fools, or take to some concocted modern practices, or try to figure out, why is this happening to me? He didn't do that. He remained loyal to the instructions and service of his guru, giving all loyalty to him without deviation. And this precise loyalty was exemplified by our Srila Prabhupada in all instances, without compromise. And I will give an example close to my heart, because throughout my life as an aspiring devotee, in all circumstances, this has been my guiding beacon. And it occurred in San Francisco in 1967. Now, just want a quick pause here, because we got kind of started a little late, and I had kind of planned on an hour. So should I cut down to fit within the time, or is it okay if I go over time a little bit? Can you quickly tell me? Yes, no?
We have time.
So, thank you. And your voice is a little distorted, so I'm hoping you said yes. In this situation, and I will not go into great detail, but it was July of 1967. And for those of you who are familiar with the life of Srila Prabhupada, and have read the Lilamrita, which I humbly advise everyone, please read Lilamrita, become familiar with Srila Prabhupada's life. So he had suffered a medical emergency earlier in the year, the end of May. And the devotees, in great despair, didn't know how to help him. So they tried a couple of things. I mean, first they put him in a hospital, which he didn't want, and after a few days he said, "Get me out of here, they're just simply poking me and taking my blood." Then they got him a little cottage on the coast of the New Jersey shoreline, thinking fresh ocean air, fresh ocean breeze, and sunshine would be very healing. But instead of fresh ocean air and sunshine, it was dark, cold, and extremely windy. Strong wind is not the same as a pleasant breeze. So he was then brought to San Francisco, and again we had a small cottage on the Pacific coast. In New Jersey, it was Atlantic Ocean coast. And it was better climate conditions, but he was not regaining his health. During this time, while he was in that little cottage in California, we held the first, this is a little historical insert here, we held the first Rath Yatra festival outside of India in July of 1967. And he was not even able to attend. The next day after the festival, we brought Jagannath Subhadra and Malati to see Srila Prabhupada, and they remained with him for 1 week. So, as he felt he was not regaining his health, he told the devotees that he wanted to meet all of us in San Francisco. And at that time, we were still a very young group of devotees. If you consider 1967, We were not even 1 year old, and the devotees, we were just a few minutes old in our attempts to become Krishna consciousness. Iskcon was not a year old, and we were just, like we were babies in the preschool. So he came, he sat very erect, and he said that, told us that he decided to return to India to recover his health. And in saying that, he said, I'm an old man. I may die at any time. I want you boys and girls to push on this movement. And honestly, we were shocked to the core of our hearts. The primary mantra in the Hare Krishna movement, we all know, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. But there's that secondary mantra, and we'd already learned it. And that secondary mantra, birth, death, disease, and old age. And so we knew that, but somehow it had not really entered our lives by way of actual experience. So when he told us this, we were feeling quite bewildered what to do, how to do it. In his presence, we were empowered to go out and preach fearlessly, even though we hardly knew anything. But it didn't matter. In January of '67, I was initiated. Right after the initiation ceremony, he told us, now you go out and preach. There were four of us, and we looked at each other. I raised my hand. How do we do this? Because at that point, we were just a few days in his association. There were no books, there were no older devotees per se. The older devotees were just a few minutes senior to us. So, is it possible to turn off your videos? Because I'm in action, and it's really distracting to me, to be honest with you. If somehow maybe just turn off the videos so I don't see. Because it makes me think I can do something wrong, or should I correct?
You're okay, Mataji. You're okay, Prabhu.
So, we felt like, I mean, how do we actually call this? Just listen to what I tell you, and repeat. First instruction, the leadership role. So, we were ready to do like that. We had probably conscious minded, we were listening, and then we would go out and we would try to preach. And if people ask us questions, we answer them. But I know someone who does, and we could go to Srila Prabhupada. And if he was not present in San Francisco, perhaps he was in New York, because those were the only two centers at the time, we could write to him, and he would answer immediately. There's thousands of letters. You can read many of these letters from Prabhupada in the Sikhamrita. Or we could even call him. So he was always right there for us. But now he's saying he may not even come back. He's leaving, he may not come back, and we're supposed to push on this movement. So one of the devotees, Mukunda Adhikari at the time, he was thinking, how can we do this? We don't know so much actually. So recalling how Srila Prabhupada had requested help from his godbrothers in the beginning, even before he came to America, requesting help to come and help spread this Krishna consciousness. He asked, would it be all right in your absence if we invited one of your godbrothers to assist us? No question of replacing him, just assist us. And when he asked that question, Srila Prabhupada became very, very silent. It was like one of those silence that you read about at the first Ananda Charan. So silent that you could hear a pin drop in the sand. And when he spoke, it was in a very grave, deep voice. And he said, my spiritual master was not an ordinary man. He saved me. If even one person were to come and change even one word of what I have taught you, the whole thing would be spoiled. Everything I have to teach you is in these books. What were these books in?
Recording in progress.
What were these books? It was the first volume of Srimad Bhagavatam in 3 parts. That was it. That was all we had. We did not even have Bhagavad Gita. And he said, everything I have to teach you are in these books. Can you imagine how valuable the first canto of the Bhagavatam is? Written prior to his coming to America, with purports that are rich with meaning and vision, instructions that are completely pertinent to this day. It's almost as if he's talking about today when you read his purport. How is it he was able to be so visionary, to explain everything in such a way that it remains always fully relevant? He explained that himself later on. He said, he told some disciples one time, as he was admonishing that we should study his books, he goes, even I read my own books. Do you know why I read my own books? Because when I sit down to write, Krishna comes and speaks to me in my ear, and I simply write what he is dictating. Consider that. So, everything I have to teach you is in these books. I'm an old man. I may die at any moment. Again, we knew the disease old age, okay, but we did not think we should qualify as an old man. In those days, as hippies, now former hippies, we had another mantra, the hippie mantra. There was a few hippie mantras. Love and peace was one of those mantras. But also we said, don't trust anyone over the age of 30. And here was Srila Prabhupada, 70 years old. We fully trusted him. We fully trusted him to the extent we offered our very lives to him, because we didn't see him as an old man. He said, I may die at any moment. We couldn't process that. I want you boys and girls to push on this movement. How would you do that? My spiritual master is not an ordinary man. He saved me. With no personal or agenda or pride, he was giving full credit and loyalty to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Even one person were to come and change even one word to what I have to teach you, the whole thing will be spoiled. There was no false ego implied in the statement. He was protecting us and protecting Iskcon in our early stages of infancy. Iskcon being 31 years old at the time. Isn't it fanatical for a parent to hold tightly to the hand of a young child when crossing dangerous streets? This is their duty. And Srila Prabhupada, he knew what we could not understand, and he was protecting us and protecting this fledgling movement. Bhagavatam teaches one should not become a guru if they cannot save their dependents from repeated birth and death. Srila Prabhupada saw how his five brothers had ignored his early attempts to work cooperatively with them and spread Krishna consciousness. He heard their criticism that Swami Maharaj has left India for America, associating with the mathajis. Imagine that. Now that there was some success, their interest would not be to help, but rather to gain control by interfering. He could understand what we could not, and later incidents proved this to be a fact. Everything I have to teach you is in these books. And these books, as mentioned, the 3 volumes of the first canto, were carefully brought over on the Jala Duta. There were not even enough copies for everyone to have one. He brought initially 250 copies just for a matter of information. So he was leaving the future of the Hare Krishna movement Iskcon in the hands of children who could barely understand what was happening then, let alone what would happen in the future. So it is our good fortune, all of us, to be counted as his disciples, his grand disciples, his followers, now and into the future. And it's our duty to remain loyal to his teachings. As members of Iskcon, it is our duty to remain loyal to his teachings and legacy, so that we may proudly cherish and participate in the future of Iskcon. In 2016, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Iskcon. Some of you on this conference will be around for the 100th year jubilee. So please mark these instructive words and remain and become a loyal follower of Srila Prabhupada and his Iskcon mission. Srila Prabhupada will empower anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness with sincere faith and determination. He will empower you with the ability to further this mission by carrying out his order. And it's a standing order, a personal instruction to every member of this fund for all time and all countries to please help push on this movement. One time, early on, 67, I think maybe 68, he was giving a darshan, giving instructions in San Francisco, and he was telling us, go out and preach, open centers. And Malati Devi Dasi, even the ladies? Even the ladies? Yes, even the ladies. So in a letter of 1969, in a letter to Himabadi, one of the early disciples, Prabhupada wrote that in India, all of the acharyas and their descendants later on acted only from the man's side. Their wives were at home because that is the system. That was the system from the old times, that women were not required to go out. And he continued, but in Bhagavad Gita we find that women are also equally competent like the men in the matter of Krishna consciousness movement. Please note this. Women are equally competent like the men in the matter of Krishna consciousness movement. Please, therefore, carry on these missionary activities and prove it by practical example. There is no bar for anyone in the matter of preaching work for Krishna consciousness. This letter you can find. It was written in 1969. Prabhupada puts in a purport that lecture is also kirtan. So as morning kirtan is there, similarly morning lecture can also be delivered. So far as boys or girls lecturing in the morning, actually no, this is also in the letter, sorry. And so far as boys or girls lecturing in the morning, that doesn't make any difference. Either boy or girl devotees may deliver a lecture if we choose to do so. We have no such bodily designations, male or female. Krishna consciousness is on the spiritual platform. As such, anyone who is a devotee of the Lord, following along in specific succession can deliver lecture in the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. In I think it was 75, there's another wonderful letter that he wrote to a young lady named Jennifer. And he began, my dear Jennifer, and in that letter he told her, we are Vaishnavas. We are not concerned with male or female position in life. That is simply bodily concept of life. It is not spiritual, whether one is male or female. It doesn't matter. Simply chant Hare Krishna and follow the four regulated principles, and your life will be perfect. And in 1972, July, there was a very famous letter, well-known letter, that was written to my god sister, Malati Devi Dasi. Devi Dasi and her husband at the time, who Prabhupada would call Pantaji, his name was Pujuma, but he was helping Prabhupada with his translating work, and he had learned Sanskrit, was one of the first members of Iskcon to...
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
So he was one of the first members to study and adequately learn Sanskrit. And she was doing transcribing, of course, with the Prabhupada, and also she was doing Pujari Seva and had a small son. So she had written to Srila Prabhupada, and here's his beautiful answer. My dear Anandati, please accept my blessings. I'm the receipt of your letter dated July 19, 1972. And I'm simply surprised that you would want to give up your child to some other persons, even they're also devotees. So the thing was, she was doing all this service and she was doing this Pujari work. And some devotees were wanting her to do more. And they were saying, they'll take care of her child. So she was not sure. She initially went along with it, and she wasn't sure if this was the right thing or not. And so she wrote to Prabhupada, and this is his reply. I'm simply surprised you don't want to give up your child to some other persons, even they are also devotees. For you, child worship is more important than deity worship. If you cannot spend time with them, then stop the duties of Pujari. At least you must take care of your son until he is 4 years old. And if after that you are unable anymore to take care of him, then I shall take care of him. These children are given to us by Krishna. They are Vaishnavas, and we must be very careful to protect them. They are not ordinary children. They are Vaikuntha children. And we are very fortunate to give them the chance to advance further in Krishna consciousness. That is a very great responsibility. Do not neglect it or be confused. Your duty is very clear. Our lives were surrounded by Srila Prabhupada's affection, and it was often evident in how he interacted with us as Vaishnavas. One very sweet letter, February 20th in 69, addressed to my dear little mothers, the only time we were ever called mothers by him, by the way, my dear little mothers, Yamuna, Malati, Janati. Please accept my blessings. I lost my mother when I was only 14 years old, so I didn't get much of my mother's affection in my childhood. But in my old age, Krishna has given me so many young mothers to take care of me. Another mother, Govinda Dasi, is there in Hawaii. She's always asking me to go there, so I will go there within this month. Well, just remember another instruction that Srila Prabhupada had mentioned to my husband Sundar when he was serving him. And this goes along with the letter to Anandati, just in terms of concept and mood. So I don't know the exact details of the conversation, but Prabhupada's comment was very succinct, and he told Shyam Sundar that the child can live without the father. Speaking about young children, but the child can live without the father, but without the mother, it is living hell. And then you can see by this letter that he lost his mother when I was only 14 years old. So I didn't get much of my mother's affection. So the role of motherhood was given such great esteem, respect, value, and importance by His divine grace. He mentioned one time that among Vaishnavas there may be some difference of opinion due to everyone's personal identity. But in spite of all personal differences, the cult, this is his word, he uses the word cult. Nowadays some people are not comfortable with that word, and Srila Prabhupada would talk, the cult of Krishna consciousness, the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the cult of Krishna consciousness must go on. And we can see that under the instructions of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, they began preaching Krishna consciousness movement in an organized way over the past 100 years. This is our Srila Prabhupada speaking. And he continued that the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, they're all godbrothers. And although there are some differences of opinion, and although we are not acting conjointly, every one of us is spreading this Krishna consciousness movement according to his own capacity and producing many disciples all over the world. As far as we are concerned, we have already started the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And like many thousands of Europeans and Americans, boys and girls, have joined this movement. And indeed it is spreading like wildfire. The cult of Krishna consciousness based on the 9 principles of devotional service, the Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Martinam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atman, Nivedam, can never be stopped. The cult of Krishna consciousness based on these 9 principles of devotional service can never be stopped. It will go on in a distinction of caste, color, creed, or country. No one can check it. No one can check it. This part is from the purport, Bhagavatam 4:28-21. And another point, he told Hari Sari, Hari Sari, he said the secret of his success was that he engaged the ladies, he engaged the women. And recently, Anutama Prabhu copied and pasted a post on one of our American leadership conferences. And in that, he said, his female disciples were more intelligent than men. So, there was another incident that I was part of that occurred in Calcutta, India. And all of us, the men and women, were living in that temple. It's the same temple that's there presently with some modifications. But it was quite an awkward situation for many reasons. And the men were feeling some discomfort having to live in such narrow quarters with the ladies. And of course, that made us feel uncomfortable too. And if anybody has been to Calcutta Temple, you know that there's a pond in front of it. I imagine it's still there. There was a pond in front of the temple. And one of the issues in the temple was that there was only one bathroom for everyone to use, men and women. We had to share this bathroom. But when Prabhupada was not present, because when he wasn't present, the men could use his bathroom. And there were 2 doors, one on each side of the bathroom. And for the ladies to get to our quarters, which were actually on the roof of the temple, we were living on the roof outside with mosquito nets kind of like covering us. They had to go through the door, through these doors. And sometimes people would forget to lock the doors, so, it could be a little embarrassing sometimes. And sometimes people would forget to fill the water container, because in those times, the water did not go all day. You had to fill a big container. So then you would find out the water would go off, there was no water to take a bath, or anything else you might need to do. Very awkward. So the men started talking among themselves, and they were saying that it would be better for the women to live somewhere else. That the women should go somewhere else and live outside the temple. So on one morning walk, they decided to present this idea to Prabhupada. Now the women in the temple at that time included myself, Kalika, and Kashaya. And while Prabhupada would be on the walk, we would clean the entire temple. We were also pujaris, meaning we would also bathe in our saditis, etc. We would also eat the masses, by the way. So the men were on a walk, and they presented to Prabhupada that, I mean, again, if you can shut off your videos if you're going to have a lot of activity, because I'm sorry, it really distracts me, because I'm just wondering what's going on and what you should do. So they're telling this to Prabhupada, and he listened and didn't say anything. Now they're returning to the temple, and we always knew when he would return because the stairs were wooden in those days, and you could hear this Prabhupada's cane coming up the staircase. And as soon as we would hear that cane, we would open the doors and we'd stand there to greet him. So that day, not knowing exactly what had happened, that the men were presenting how we should be removed from the temple, we stood there, we'd open the door, and Prabhupada was coming up, and then suddenly he stopped, and he turned around, and he uttered the first words on that walk. He goes, yes, acknowledging that he'd heard him, yes. But if you associate with these women, and then he turned and pointed to us with his cane, if you associate with these women, you'll go back to Godhead. So that ended the discussion of relocating the ladies out of the temple. As a slightly humorous aside, we noticed, the ladies were noticing that other women were they were bathing in that lake across from the temple. So we thought perhaps it would make things easier that we should also go and bathe in that lake, and that way we wouldn't be tying up the bathroom, people in the bathroom. So we started doing that. And it didn't last long because one of our well-wishers, a very nice Bengali gentleman, came to see the Prabhupada and goes, Swamiji, you ladies are bathing in the lake with the prostitutes. Because we didn't realize that those other ladies were prostitutes. So obviously, it didn't look so good that we were bathing in with the prostitutes, although our intention was to try to alleviate the awkward situation. So I'm just hoping somehow or other that particularly for the new persons who are coming to Krishna consciousness, that you solidify your connection with Srila Prabhupada. Of course, all of us must do that as members of Iskcon. Solidify our connection to Srila Prabhupada, and that can be done through service, through reading his books, through carefully studying his books, associating those devotees who are themselves fixed in Krishna consciousness. And this idea of becoming fixed in Krishna consciousness can only happen through following the instructions of Srila Prabhupada and not someone else, if you're a member of Iskcon. So that is just my short little message that I hope will be taken into consideration. And when everybody is acting in accord with Srila Prabhupada's instructions and messages, this Krishna consciousness movement, as Prabhupada said, will go on. It is said for 10,000 years. And we don't want to be the cause of distraction. We want to be the cause of assistance. We want to be part of pushing on this movement, now and until the future. So thank you, all of you who are taking the time to participate. And I hope that your lives in Krishna consciousness will always be enriched by the association and teachings of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very, very grateful. Thank you, Mati Mandi. Are you able to hear me? Thank you. much, Mataji.
Somehow I'm not able to hear you properly. When I first logged in, I heard Malati Dasi very clearly. I'm so happy to see her and hear her. But somehow or other, we're having a microphone problem, I think. A little audio problem, yes. So thank you very much, and I wish everyone unlimited success always in Krishna consciousness. And please do not hesitate to fully express